She's such a remarkable being. There's at least 2 documentaries made about her, Chasing Buddha and Key to Freedom. She, among the countless things she's done to benefit us, she's started Wisdom Publications, which is the largest Buddhist publishing house in the world. She created the Liberation Prison Project, which has helped who knows how many people who are in prison to really change their lives and beyond around. She edited Mandala magazine. She was the driving force behind Shantideva Center's development. She's I think of her as the embodiment of joyful perseverance, of the realization of the preciousness of human life. If you want to know what it's like to have those realizations, I think just look at Venerable Robina, and I think that's your answer. And I'm just so grateful for the precious opportunity that she'll be teaching us tonight, and that she'll be offering us teachings to our center for the rest of the week and through the weekend. And that's my best effort to put into words the true joy of this opportunity that we have. So I don't know if Venerable has joined us yet, but she'll be with us any moment. Let me see. So has anybody seen any good movies lately? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I imagine that most people who are here are familiar with Venerable Robina because when Venerable Robina comes to teach, we always have a beautiful turnout, a great turnout, and that's no wonder. It's no wonder at all.
I have a suggestion.
Sure.
Oh, well, it's not a movie recommendation, but it's a TV series out of Melbourne, Robina's hometown. It's called Offspring. So it's total drama at every
Very
turn.
nice. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you.
So
Venerable
has
Robina
anybody
has
else heard
just
of
joined
that?
us.
Okay.
There, Gus. I can hear Gus. You turn.
Hi, Venerable.
Where are you? Oh, there you go. Hello, my dear. How are you?
Well, thank you. So good to see you.
I'm so happy to be here. So shall we begin, Gus? Are we ready?
Yes. I just introduced you.
Okay, fantastic. So then I think good. Okay. So I don't know. You start. What would you normally do in the beginning?
Me, I usually I start us by just doing a quick mindfulness of the breath, just to settle the mind, and then to set the dedication, the motivation. I mean.
Oh, you do. Okay. Well, I'll just do the prayer. Then we can do. I want to ask you some questions first. So we just start putting ourselves in the right direction. Okay. All the lamas will tell us we should set our motivation. But we probably would say, what's our purpose? Why are we here together? What's the goal? What's the purpose? That's the way we'd say it. We wouldn't say what our motivation is. So, but that's what they call it. So we think, okay, the first 2 lines of this prayer we're going to sing, well, for those of us who already identify with being a Buddhist, is kind of reiterating our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. We can say that. And the second 2 lines are expressing this motivation, but it's kind of like a very grand and very long-term one. It's a marvelous one, this goal, this purpose. So we're thinking we're going to listen to these teachings to see if there's something useful we can take from it so that we can develop our amazing potential all the way to Buddhahood so that we can be a benefit to others. That's the really big long-term goal. Okay, that's our motivation. So we'll sing our little prayer. Do we show the prayer, Gus? Can we have the prayer on screen so we can all sing together?
Teresa, I think, can put it up on the screen.
Yes, please. And if you just want to sit and relax and listen, or you can join in as you wish. And it's important to have that meaning in our mind as we sing the prayer. Sangye chodang soke chognam la jangsho badu dagni kyap suchi dagi chonyen gi sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye chodang soke chognam la jangsho badu dagni kyap suchi dagi chonyen gi sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye chodang soke chognam la jangsho badu dagni kyap suchi Dagi chonyen gi sonam ki drola penchir sange drupa shok. Okay, thank you. So what I want to ask Gus though is what you've done so far.
Okay, yes, we've only had one session so far. So let me just take a quick look at what we've covered. We've talked about we touched on what all the components are of a daily practice, the way Lama Zopa Rinpoche recommends them. And we talked about how to wake up and set the motivation for the day in the morning. And we started talking about the 6 preparatory practices. And we talked in some detail about the first 4. Or rather the first 3, I'm sorry. We haven't talked about invoking the merit field, offering the 7-limb prayer, and mandala, and making requests.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to leave all these details to you, and I'm just going to rave on a little bit. Is that okay?
Thank you. Yes.
I think you can do all the details. It sounds so perfect and so kind of classical and so amazing, but you'll have to do all that part. So I just think, and it's a bit carrying on from our talk on, what was it? Tuesday or Monday, I forget, when we talked about what mindfulness meditation isn't. So it's, that was yesterday, maybe, I forget. So then I just want to talk about when we say the word practice, I think often when we come into the Tibetan Buddhist teachings, it's already so entrenched, isn't it? Okay, I know when I first went to my first teachings with Lama Zopa Rinpoche back early, a long time ago, it's sort of like you're dropping into this whole new world, and there's no warning, there's no kind of, this is going to be, it's just, you just leap in and I spent the months trying to struggle how to get my head around what he was talking about. It was so complex and so abstract for me, because it's not our culture. And so there's so many assumptions that are built into that. In other words, it's already set up for a person who's a Tibetan and who comprehends all these words. It's so extensive, and so it's marvelous. So for me, often and this is where Lama Yeshe comes in. Lama Yeshe was completely different. He somehow intuited our modern minds and was able to talk to us in a way that it always made me feel like, oh my God, now it makes sense. Now I know what I'm doing. And even over the years, I'm a Buddhist. I became a nun 18 months after meeting the Lamas. I knew that that's what I wanted. It was my path. It was very clear. And even from editing, I was working for Wisdom from the very beginning, editing all these books, editing Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, this really classical Lamrim Bible, really, and I still didn't even understand what they were talking about. All these things of merit fields and all these visualizations. I just didn't have a clue. It was really hard to sort of extract the essence from it. That was Lama Yeshe's skill, and I found that immensely appealing. And so now over all these years, being a typical Tibetan Buddhist, it's still important, so important for me to try and get to the essence, to try and unpack all these concepts and really analyze what we're trying to do, So the key thing about a daily practice, whatever you're doing, whatever you're learning, whether it's tennis or cooking or killing people, and don't think I'm ridiculous, you've got to practice. You've got to have a daily routine. You've got to know what you're doing. You've got to have a discipline. You've got to have all the components together. Then you're going to do it properly, So, but I think already this is one of the hardest things for us in our culture. And that's why we've got to start very humble and very small. This wonderful course going through this Discovering Buddhism module, and Gus has been teaching the perfect way. But even then, sometimes what happens is you'll listen to all that and you'll try to be a good Tibetan Buddhist, and after a month you're freaking out because you can't handle it, or 2 minutes, and then you end up chucking the baby out with the bathwater. So it's so important to hear all these things, but then to really question, to try and ask, what is all this? What does it all mean? Because again, you see, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, when he just talked about all the preparatory practices and all the merit field, this is so complex for us. It's so unusual, if you haven't been a Catholic, if you've been a Jew, it'll freak you out. If you've been a Catholic, it's kind of more Catholic than all the Catholics. They leave the Catholics for dead, So it's so important to look at all these components and then take them according to your pace. So let's say after you've done this Discovering Buddhism course and you hear all these things that Gus is telling you, the 7, this is the 4, this and that, and you decide, no, I can't handle all that, and that's just fine. You've really got to, it's so important to you to know your own mind well, to know you want to do the practice, you're committed even, you've decided, but you've got to take it at your own pace, and you've got to do what makes sense to you, and you've got to do it for the right reason. Otherwise you just get upset, you get freaked, you get nervous, and then you chuck it all out. This is extremely important to do, so incredibly important. So then the key point, I think, behind a daily practice of anything is that, is the thing of discipline. We all know we're just bone lazy. With respect to us, we're bone lazy. And what it's interesting when you study the Bodhisattva teachings, and they talk about the 6 perfections, and the fourth of the first 4, and it's the most difficult. They call it enthusiasm. They call it joyful effort. It sounds like really kind of hyper, So, and what the opposite is laziness. And the more we understand the teachings, the more we understand the analysis of what laziness is. Laziness is can't be bothered. Can't be bothered. So anything, this is the point, what you can't be bothered doing in all your life, whatever it might be, including a samsaric activity, going to the gym, you can't be bothered doing what takes effort. And what is it that takes effort is doing what attachment doesn't want. So when we understand attachment from being Buddhist, and you learn it more and more and more, and you understand this driving force that's so primordial in us, it's not just kind of this cute, oh, I'm attached to chocolate cake. The Buddhist analysis of attachment is primordially deep, you know, and basically the major attachment we all have beyond sex, drugs, rock and roll and all the rest is this yearning to be comfortable. We don't like getting out of our comfort zone. So whether you're learning mathematics or whether you're going to the gym every day or whether you learn to become a Buddha, you know, you don't like hard, we don't like feeling difficult, we don't like stress, we don't like pushing, but that's what effort means. So the thing is, if we want, all the lamas say, if you know, with enthusiasm, joyful effort, you can't force joyful effort, it's the result of hard work. But they say when you understand the benefits of something, then you will have the enthusiasm to do it. Then you'll push, my words now, then you'll push against your comfort zone. I mean, we kind of know that. So, and the trouble is, it's much easier to see the benefits of going to the gym. It's easier to see the benefits of going on a diet. But even those, it's so evident the benefit, and that's samsara. But look how difficult even that is. Why? Because our attachment wins every time. Can't be bothered. You're in a chilly night, it's all raining outside, you know, you've been to gym twice this week, you're all hyper and excited, the third day comes, and before you know it, you're going, oh no, can't be bothered, I'll go tomorrow, you know. And that's the killer. You put it off. It's the worst kind of laziness, procrastination. So you've got to be prepared to know that it won't necessarily feel good. Practice is that. Anybody, we know anyone on the planet, whoever is achieving something, and I'm just talking ordinary life now, not spiritual practice. We admire people who push, not in an erotic way, not in a stressful way, but who make an effort. You know yourself. If you go to the gym and you got your exercises, and you're on, you know, I like the rowing one, the nice rowing one, I like that. And it's the second you're on the rowing, oh, I'm doing my rowing, you say to yourself, and the millisecond it hurts, and you think, oh no, it's too much now, I'll stop. And you pretend you did your rowing, but in fact you didn't do your rowing. The only time any benefit will come to your body, and we know this, is when you go beyond your comfort zone. It's got to start hurting. And then of course you pace yourself. You don't do it till you die, but you will not get benefit from anything at the gym. You will not get benefit from anything until you go beyond that point where it becomes difficult. And then of course you grow that point keeps moving as you get better and better and better. Now we know that's called learning something. So if you don't have real confidence in the benefits of what's called a spiritual practice, you know, and it's really hard to do that. We do. If we look at the Dalai Lama, we look at our lamas, I say Lama Zopa, we say, oh, Dalai Lama, everybody knows him. Everybody, you know, if we're really using him properly, we don't just go, oh, that's just the Dalai Lama. Oh, I'm not like that. I can't do that. That's the worst kind of laziness, actually. The one that says, oh, I can't do it. Not possible. There's 3 levels of laziness, you know. The first one just can't be bothered. Then it's putting it off, procrastinating, which sounds like a virtue. I mean, it's a lie, though. The main pain we have in our daily life is all our things we're putting off doing because we can't be bothered, because attachment doesn't like it. But the worst laziness is, it's not possible. No. You see the goal, you see yourself, and you see no way in between. And that's anything. You know, 2 kids can sit down and watch basketball, and one kid can be full of enthusiasm. I want to become like that. And then they will work hard. The other says, no, I can't do that. That's the worst one. And that's the one that holds us back. I can't do it. Not possible. So we've really got to be very clear about this. First, be clear, what is the goal? Okay, if you're a full-fledged Buddhist, you're on the Bodhisattva path, you've taken refuge, you're committed to it, then okay, you know, you'll maybe make an effort, but it's not comfortable to make an effort. I mean, even now, all these years, I still do my practice every day. I don't break my commitments, but it's not comfortable. In the morning, I'm anticipating my delicious breakfast. I mean, you know, who sits there with such joy in your meditation that you forget breakfast? The Bodhisattvas, yes. None of us do. But at least I make the effort and I do it, you know, and that's the key thing. It will be difficult. I'm not trying to put you off, but we all know this. But unfortunately, with spiritual things, we get so fantasizing about, oh, meditation, wonderful experience. And that's one of the misconceptions I maybe mentioned about meditation, that you do it to feel good. I mean, that's beyond ridiculous. You don't meditate to feel good. Eat an ice cream, you'll feel much better. I prefer to have an ice cream. You're going to feel good. That's ridiculous. It's naive to think meditation or practice is that. And this is one of the biggest stumbling blocks, you know. I mean, I see that myself, the number of people who say take refuge. Rinpoche's given me permission to give people refuge, and I send the different things. And many people you never hear again because it was a nice idea on the day and then they forget all about it. So we've really got to know why we're doing it and be reasonable and rational and know that when you practice anything, practice means, I mean, you know, you say you practice tennis, you get a real vivid sense of growth when you do something like tennis or music, and you're really serious about it. And we all know we do admire the people who are enthusiastic. We admire that they get up in the morning regardless. You know, all these little gymnasts, you know, 4 years old, they travel 3 hours every morning to go to the gym. That's commitment. That's 4 years old, for God's sake. So this is the thing that's most of the stumbling blocks for most of us. People have been practicing for 30 years, still, I can't do my practice properly. I miss my practice. I don't keep my commitments. And there's always this stress around it, you know, because then because it's spiritual, we get guilty and neurotic. We're going to get punished and go to hell or something. I mean, so we've really got to think about what we're doing and then start, like anything, start small. You don't try to do, you know, 5-mile jog when on the first day you'll die. You've got to go gradual. So, I mean, even though Gus is giving all these classical, you know, components of a practice, but it's pretty high end, the level he's talking about, all these components. And if you've got enormous enthusiasm, great. Some people just love their practice, but it's unusual, I promise you, I really promise. So that's various things. And this is similar to my view about the way I've been talking about meditation, the misconceptions we have about it. But the key point is, you've got to know why you're doing it. You've got to know what the benefit is. If you think you've got a morning practice because you're going to feel better, you'll be disappointed. If you think, even if you do a little bit of meditation and forget other things like reading prayers and different things that are part of the components, you know, if you think that you're going to make all the thoughts go away, you'll be disappointed. I mean, you got to have the right expectations. And you've got to go one step at a time, according to your pace, using logic and clarity about, you know, and answering your question, why am I doing this? And then the other point is this. Just like with the gym, I mean, it's just a simple analogy, you know, the end result, let's say you're 25 pounds overweight and no muscle tone, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. You don't come home from the gym and look in the mirror and go, I'm disappointed, I didn't lose 25 pounds. You're being stupid. You know, it's a gradual progress. And you know, you go to the gym for 2 hours, puffing and panting and sweating, and you come home, you look in the mirror, there's not a fraction of difference. So you don't get disappointed. You know that you're sowing the seeds. And I think this is one of the major ones in the Buddhist approach that we don't understand, even though we're good little Buddhists for years, you know. The real benefit, the correct way, I think, to understand the benefits of a daily practice based upon the Buddha's view about karma. And this is the building blocks of Buddhism, that every millisecond of what we think and do and say sows seeds in our mind, programs our mind. So, you know, it's like, for me, actually gardening is a really good analogy. You've got a junky old garden out there. That's your mind right now, okay? And you've learned about botany and you're all excited and you can visualize the end result. You can visualize the pear trees and the rose bushes and the lovely lawn. You can visualize the end result, and you must do that. You must have a goal. You've got to have a plan if you're going to grow a garden. You can't just chuck, if you want to live in the wild, okay, chuck a few seeds here and there and cross your fingers. But we all know you have to have a plan. If you're going to build a house, you can't just put wood up and cross your fingers. You have a plan. Nothing wrong with that. Well, why not this here too? So the plan, long-term goal, why not have the long-term Buddhahood? Then you've really got to have the long-term goal then, many lifetimes. But the same analogy, the same logic applies, the same logic. You've got to know where you're heading. You've got to know what the end result is. And then you've got to know the benefit of that. So that's a long-term one for most of us. It's a really tough one. But the more we hear the teachings, the more it gives us enthusiasm. But the point I'm getting at is this. There's your garden, you know, it looks fairly undisturbed, but there's nothing growing there. And so you start on the first day and you start digging up the dirt. Why? Because you want to start pulling out the weeds and making space for the flowers. And that, by the way, is a good analogy for all the practices that are called purification. And you want to grow the flowers. That's called the practices of creating merit. So creating merit is putting the flowers in, and purification is pulling the weeds out. Well, pulling weeds out is messy business. So after the first, you know, if you're doing this out in your garden and you know what you're doing, you've got the vision, and I come out and I've never heard of botany and I see you in a complete mess up to your knees in dirt, I'll think you are out of your brain. You've just made a big mess. Look at this. You'll be happy. And you have to explain to me, but Robina, I'm pulling out the weeds because it's a big mess there. Well, this is a perfect analogy for practice. So you're not going to, so you don't go to your garden and judge your success. This is my point now. You do not judge your success in that gardening by determining how well you feel. It maybe was a sunny day. Maybe you're feeling young and healthy and fit and it's a lovely day and the gardening wasn't too bad and you feel good afterwards. But that's not the criterion of success. What has feeling good got to do with whether a weed comes out? What is feeling good got to do with the seeds you plant? The seeds will bring their fruits whether you feel good or not. So that's the point about meditation and practice. You have a different view of it. But it's like with meditation, we're so addicted to feeling good. We're like children with respect to us, So we use that as our criterion of success, which is why we stop practice after 1 week. Because we don't have a proper view about it. We don't quite really think through in our own words what we're trying to accomplish. We're on a long-term goal here, Even if you just want to kind of start to get some more, whatever your goal is. But even if your goal is to learn to know your mind better, become your own therapist, as Namayoshi puts it, this is pretty stupendous. This is pretty amazing to become a more stable, more fulfilled, more content person so you can be kind to others. That's a nice short-term view. It's not all the way to Buddhahood, but it's a pretty good one. So from that point of view, don't expect to feel good because starting to see your delusions, you don't feel happy seeing all the weeds, I promise you. But you've got to see your weeds because they're the problem. So it's not the typical, the childish way, almost, we think about a spiritual practice in the West, to feel better, to feel good, this kind of really romantic notion. And on the other hand, doesn't mean you have to suffer all the time. But it's not, the view we have is why we always give up, And then the trouble is because you don't feel good, you think you failed, so you stop. It's just completely the wrong criterion, It's just foolish to think this way. But the real one is because until you're highly realized, until you've got some semblance of single pointed concentration, which comes from incredible commitment and hard work, you're not going to have much bliss in your practice. It's rare to find a person, I find, my personal experience, to find a person who's really joyful doing their visualizations and saying their mantras. Maybe you're so virtuous and you are, and I really rejoice, but not everybody's like that. Not everybody's like that. You've really got to the key one is you've got to know why you're doing it and you've got to know why you're choosing to do it. You are the boss in your life, okay? Your guru is not the boss and Buddha's not the boss. And get my point when I say that. You've got to be in charge of your life and got to be in charge of your decisions. And you've got to want to be disciplined because that's how you accomplish anything, is by being disciplined. You go to the gym whether you like it or not. You practice the piano whether you like it or not. You don't eat that sugar whether you like it or not. We all know that is necessary. And that's often the piece that's missing. And that's why then we feel miserable, we put it off and we feel guilty and we keep creating more double trouble for ourselves, So it's so important. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? What's the goal? Okay, a long-term goal is so massive, Buddhahood. I mean, it's like lifetimes to go. But if you've got that logic and that makes sense to you, then fine. And then at the same time, when you do the gardening and you've got a headache and it's raining, but you just did your weeding. So then this is the other point now, when we talk about what happiness means, to feel good, to feel happy. This is something we just have a great misconception about, When we say happy, we're so addicted to its being like physical happiness, joy, like a lovely taste, and the lovely weather, and the lovely sunshine, the lovely boyfriend, all those conditions out there that trigger a pleasant feeling. So what we mean by happiness mostly is when nice things happen. But if you've just done that gardening, and the gym, think of the gym, and these are just analogies. If you've been to the gym and you've got a headache, but you go anyway and you do your exercises and you come home and your muscles are aching, but don't you feel good about yourself? That's called happiness. And I'm talking spiritual practice now. That's just the analogy, So feeling happy, feeling good about yourself means you admire your effort. You praise yourself. You rejoice that you made effort. You don't feel good. Maybe when you sit down and do your meditation, you got a headache. You feel miserable. Maybe your boyfriend's been mean to you, but you do your disciplined practice. You do it. And that's, I think this is one of the most powerful things. Whenever we keep whenever we achieve the goal we've decided, like you want to go on that diet, and the effort to not eat that cake is quite strong. It's much easier to eat the cake, and the initial pleasure is definitely true. But we all know if you make the effort and you say no to the cake, you feel happy because you made the effort. And that kind of happiness is much more fundamental. It's kind of rejoicing that you made the effort, and that means you went against attachment. It's a different kind of happiness, but that's a more valid happiness, you know. That's a valid happiness. It's happiness because you rejoice in your effort, you rejoice in your hard work, you rejoice you didn't shout at your boyfriend, and you're struggling, but you're glad. That's virtue. That's that's kind of virtuous happiness, and don't make it sound holy. So we need to be disciplined, and that's the benefit, because you might not see any progress, but it's incremental. You're sowing seeds. When you have the understanding of karma, you'll really be happy about sowing seeds, just like you do gardens. You know, if you miss that one day of not putting seeds in your ground, that's one day more that your flowers won't grow. So you're so happy to put the seeds in, and you're prepared to wait because they're going to take time to come. Same here. But at the same time, it doesn't mean you wait for some happiness to come in the future. You'll be glad about your progress. You'll see how you're moving along. You'll get some insights. When you do your practice every day and you read that little particular prayer that you do, suddenly something will come to you. You'll get an insight because you're building yourself. You're building up this new person, you know. As Lama Zopa says, you're molding your mind into the shape that you like. And it's incremental, it's gradual, it's slow, but you can also rejoice in it and get enormous pleasure from it and be very happy and pat yourself on the back, rejoice. And that's a practice we never do. We never praise ourselves, not in an arrogant way, but in a good way, because you made the effort, because you know you've done the work. You can't see much result today, but you've done the work. You've purified your mind, and you've pulled out the weeds, and you've grown the flowers. This is the one that is, and this is not being neurotic or pushing. You've got to be balanced, you know. You've got to be kind to yourself, which means you praise yourself. But we never praise ourselves. We are. This is about our mind now, man. We're talking about our mind mostly. But this is also the problem, because the delusions in our mind, they're the ones that run the show. I talk about my roommates. So it's a good analogy. We all know, first of all, we're not familiar with them. We just know there's these crazy thoughts there all the time. And then only when you're shouting and yelling do you even hear them come out, or you're so depressed you can't go to bed. You notice something must be going on in your mind. That's only because we left it till too late. And this is another reason a daily practice is so powerful, I tell you. Because a daily practice, whatever the components are, you mightn't do much single point of concentration. You might not do that. That's okay. But the fact that you're being a little bit internal, sitting on your cushion, sitting on your chair, doing your private little things, reading that little prayer, doing that little practice, doing that little visualization, saying those few mantras, you're being internal. You're beginning to develop this ability to be aware of your own thoughts. And that just comes naturally. So you bring that to bear in your daily life, and you start to notice your thoughts more when you wouldn't have before. So this is really a powerful result of practice. And then you're going to see more and more of these crazy thoughts. They're just running all the time. Our crazy roommates just run the house. This is how it is. And that's because of habit. So then our problem is because we are so passive with our minds. We're so passive. I've got all these crazy thoughts, we'll say. We know that's not volitional. We know we didn't think to have the crazy thoughts. They just seem to come out of nowhere, right? Because they're habits. But it's curious. We're so passive when it comes to the positive thoughts. We wait for positive thoughts to come. And just because they don't come, we don't think they're there. You don't wait for them to come. You have to proactively have positive thoughts. We never do that. It's kind of ironic. We are addicted to our negative thoughts. And the tragedy is, this is the tragedy, we believe they're true. Because what are thoughts? Thoughts are opinions. I'm no good, I'm this, I'm not doing enough, I'm bad, whatever they are, 1,000 variations of those. And because the thoughts pop up out of nowhere, we give them incredible credibility. We assume it's like God inside us telling us the truth. We all believe our negative thoughts. This is one of our most bizarre tendencies. And this is exactly how Buddha talks about being in samsara. So then we've got, as we progress, one of our key steps forward, our key shift in practice is not that your thoughts will go away. I mean, they will not go, the thoughts, no, not that you can control the thoughts yet. It's only when we've got single pointed concentration that we've actually accomplished the brilliant, marvelous ability to control, to be in charge of the thoughts, not to suffocate them, but to be in charge. And because your mind is so subdued now, you know, your delusions aren't running the show anymore, which is pretty miraculous. But it's a while before we get there. So what's the first major step? I'd suggest the first major step in our progress is that we are more conscious of the thoughts, which is very scary. I mean, they even say in the texts, Pavanka Rinpoche says in the descriptions of I mentioned this in our meditation class. Pavanka Rinpoche says that, as this series of this meditation, calm abiding, is described in 9 stages of cultivation. And he says that one of the signs of success at the first of the 9 is that you think your mind's getting more berserk. He doesn't say that word. He says, no, you're not. You're just noticing it. So this is the brave attitude. This is forget your morning practice. This is the result of doing a morning practice, that you're becoming more conscious. So this is going to be throughout the day, This will be daily practice, that you're noticing your thoughts more. So because, as I said before, we take them so seriously, we assume because they pop up in our mind, I'm a creep, I'm no good, I can't do it, I'm not good enough. We assume it's true. I mean, this is the most bizarre thing you've ever heard. It's like all these conspiracy theorists who go on the television and hear about Satan running the show, and Mr. Trump has been, delivered by God to save us from Satan, and they'll believe it straight away. Well, we all believe our idiot thoughts. I'm an idiot, I'm no good, I can't do anything. Who says it's true? You've got to ask that question, people. But because we have that thought, we believe it. There's no logic, I'm sorry, but it's fascinating. You've got to agree. So what's our practice? You have some, you bring out your good roommates. And what are they? That's called kindness, intelligence, reasonableness, understanding, dependent arising, compassion, self-respect, self-confidence, clarity. They're all there, but where are they? The crazy roommates are running the house, and the good roommates are hiding under the bed and in the wardrobe. They're scared to come out. So you've got to consciously bring them out. I'm really serious here. And they are the intelligent thoughts and the kind thoughts and the self-respectful thoughts and the reasonable thoughts. And then, then you hear the crazy ones, and then you argue with them. Well, it's okay, Robina, you're doing okay after all, girl. It's okay, good enough. You did well today. You did 1 push-up, not bad. Instead of, I only did 1 push-up. So, but this is the irony of ego, is we're addicted to the negative. We're addicted to the misery. And it's not trying to be mean about us. We're all like this. So you can't just make them all go away, which is what we want. But you've got to allow them to come, and you've got to learn to become friends with these berserk roommates. I can't stress this enough. Really and truly. This is daily practice, all day, every day. Let them come. Let these roommates shout. Don't put your earphones on and wish they'd all go away and die. Open your earphones, open your mind, listen to the crazy negative. But this is where Mahamudra, we did this and we talked about this on whatever day it was, probably only yesterday, but it feels like a week ago. Mahamudra, you simply watch your mind. It's a really good practice of the day. You just watch the thoughts. No opinions, just watch. And then you assess when you study the mind, like you're doing with Gus. That's negative, that's anger, that's jealousy, that's low self-esteem, that's anxiety. Are they reasonable states of mind? The wisdom part of you says, no, they're not. Then okay, let's argue with them. They won't go away yet. They're really strong. They run the show, but your good ones come out, and slowly you reconfigure. You're reconfiguring your own thoughts. This is being a Buddhist, I promise. So the reason you do practice in the morning and at night is so you can do this job better. This is the essence of being a Buddhist. Not saying mantras, not doing preliminary practices, not being a nun, not being holy, not doing, not prostrating. That's not being a Buddhist. All of that, that's why they're called preliminary. And Gus is going to explain all that to you. Preliminary is a bit like, you see Roger Federer play tennis and you bliss out. Wow, amazing. And you go to Roger, can you please show me how to play tennis? I got my all ready. And he'll tell you, go off for 2 years and lose 20 pounds and go this and get muscle tone and go to the gym and learn for tennis theory and do all the push-ups. And he's saying, Roger, you didn't hear me. Can you please show me to play tennis? And you repeat his answer. He's just giving you your preliminary practices, people. That's what they mean by preliminary practices. Preliminary. You're not ready, you're not primed to play tennis. Your body and mind aren't ready yet. Well, it's the same here. Our body and mind our mind is not ready to do the actual job of seeing our delusions and being our own therapist and arguing with them. This is my advanced practice. We don't do it in our culture. That's the real practice. That's when you become a Buddhist. The rest of the stuff, all the thing of the Buddhas and seeing the holy thing and the merit field and the refuge and the this and the that and the mandala offerings, which is so esoteric to us. And Gus has got to explain these to you. They're powerful practices. And because the Tibetan Buddhist system is rooted in the Vajrayana, these are coming from the Vajrayana, So we've got to understand what a Buddha is. We've got to understand why offering a mandala to the Buddha is beneficial. How can that prime my mind to be my own therapist, to do the job of the essential job of being a Buddhist, the actual essential job from here to Buddhahood, the one job of being a Buddhist is to distinguish between delusions and virtues. That's it, I promise. Look at the word Buddha, the etymology of Buddha. Buddha implies eradication from your mind of all neuroses, all delusions. Da implies development to perfection of all the virtues and goodness. That's the bottom line. That's Buddha. And the job there, that implies the job from day one. But the preliminaries have to prime your mind to be even ready to do that job, because it's actually quite advanced. It's quite advanced, you know. But this is a job. And that's why we do a morning practice. So you've got to know you've got long term, know what you decided you're going to do. Do it with a happy mind. Happy mind meaning you're rejoicing, not judging happiness by how you feel good. No. You're rejoicing that you did what you committed to do, and you're happy to do it because you know you're sowing the seeds and you're pulling out the weeds. Be so delighted with that, you know. The garden might even look worse. When I walk out and see your crazy garden all upset, I'll think you've just gone mad. You've upset everything. You'll say, no, Robina, I'm just removing the weeds. It's going to be fantastic when it's done. Same with our mind, you know. It's so important, this attitude. I mean, I've said a lot of things already. 1:45. Now you have to ask me some questions. Come on. There's more to say yet, I promise, a lot more to say. But have you got any questions about what I've said so far?
Yes, I have a question.
Good.
I think I had a question yesterday, and it was about this, because I feel like through the practice, it gets like, sometimes it will feel like it will get worse, like the seeds, like the weeds that we'll find in my garden are worse than the things that are hiding.
Exactly right. Yes, the dirt is coming out, as Lama Zopa said. Yes. So then question?
If that was like something gradual, or it's more like a fluctuation of whatever comes out.
So you wanted to be a bit more specific about what comes out, Stephanie?
Like any delusions, for example.
Sure, that's it. That's the point that Pabonka Rinpoche is saying. You're not getting worse. If you are practicing properly, you're not getting worse when you see the anger coming out. If you follow the anger, then yeah, that's a mistake. But that's the difficulty too. We're going to we'll discuss that. So of course it's inevitable, because you're working on your mind. You're going to start seeing this stuff in your mind that's always been there. But these techniques are specifically to help us become conscious of our mind. So that, of course, it's going to be hugely difficult. Of course it is. But that's why we have to have a correct attitude towards it, to be glad that we're seeing our own mind. It's like if you didn't know you had all those weeds in your garden, you don't know you've got a problem. So you dig up the garden and you're shocked to see all the weeds. You know, because you know you're not unhappy. You know you're glad to see them because they're the problem. But it's very hard for us to see, to note, to use that attitude towards ourselves, because we have this instinct to put ourselves down. Do you understand? So you've got to have the right attitude towards it, Stephanie. It's so important. Otherwise, you go crazy. Is that answering your question?
Yes, thank you.
You've got to persevere. But like anything, you've got to know you've got the right techniques. You don't just cross your fingers and do something and hope for the best. You've got to be quite rigorous in knowing what the practices are, which practices you recommend, you're being recommended, who your teachers are. If you've got a valid system, you've got to, that's important, because whereas in the West, we tend to think of spiritual practice, well, I can just make up my own trip. Well, of course you can. But if you say you're a Buddhist, you can't, you've got to see what Buddhist practice means. You've got to use your teachers and follow the steps. You understand?
Yes, thank you.
Good. What else, people? Any questions? Well, okay. So the essence, I would put it this way: then the essence of a practice, you know, the essence of a morning practice. So, okay, no, start again. So it's really, it makes sense, doesn't it, to start and end your day with something. Just psychologically, it's very practical. I like to think of it as like two bookends that hold up your day. So the morning session is sort of like preparing you, even, and just in terms of short term, the day, you know, and then the end, the day, the practice at the end of the day is really a crucial one, especially for the Tibetan Buddhists. They all praise hugely this practice called purification, you know. And as Lama Zopa says, we're insane not to do this particular practice. I'm sure Gus is going to talk about it, the four opponent powers, if you haven't talked about it already. It's hugely important. And again, this is another point. I mentioned it briefly, but I'll say it again here. If you look at all the practices, all the techniques, all the meditations, all the attitudes, all the things you're trying to do, including the water bowls and the prostrations and the this and the that, all this complicated set of things. First of all, you've got to get some confidence that they're of their validity. Not just do them blindly with faith, faith, but superstition. Oh, it's meant to be good. I don't know why. You've got to know the logic of why you're doing these practices. So generally speaking, you can say, again, the analogy of seeds and fruits is great. All the practices that are called purification, they're pulling out the weeds, you know. And all the practice of creating merit, these are the terms they use. That's growing the flowers. So of course, many practices, obviously, well, I'd say all practices have both components, but there are some traditionally that are emphasized more for creating merit, others more for purification. But it's inevitable, you know, as you're pulling out a weed, you're straight away making space, aren't you, for a flower? Think like that. So that's the way they talk about all the practices. So so the other thing is the broader picture is to understand your practice in the framework of this Lam Rim, this amazing Tibetan packaging of all the teachings, you know. So the very first level, they call it the teachings, Lama Zopa politely referring to the very first level of the Lam Rim, this packaging, this course that you graduate from as a Buddha. You know, this course, the first level, they call it, Lama Zopa calls it the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. I'd like to call it junior school. Why not? We get it. He says the first practice, immediate, this is in your general daily life, right? Instant, right now, starting this second, the first thing to do is refrain from harming sentient beings. So, of course, you've got to ask the question, why? Well, if you're a good Christian, it's because God said. And that's appropriate. God's the boss. As my Catholic priest friend said, that what defines a sin is doing what God said not to do, but not for the Buddha. He's not the boss. For him, it's natural law. So the very first level of practice is to refrain from killing. And eventually when you become a Buddhist and you formally take vows, and then, you know, that would be the best way to do it. But the very first thing is at least don't kill, don't steal, don't jump on the wrong partner, don't lie, etc., etc. 7 little baby things with your body and speech, he starts telling us. That's actual practice. That's actual practice, you know, that's powerful practice. So you can sit there wholly, do 1 hour of watching your breath every morning, but go kill the cockroaches and the ants. That's like insane. You know, demented, ridiculous, don't understand what practice is at all. Because in the end, all these practices you're doing, especially the way they're talking in the Tibetan tradition, the preliminary blah, 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 they're to prepare your mind. So you can actually control your body and your speech and your mind and become this Buddha that he says we can become. So there's different approaches to seeing even the benefit of what a morning practice is, you know. And then, of course, once you've taken refuge and you've formalized your commitment to being a Buddhist, then you have certain commitments. And that's something I find very interesting, you know, because we're lazy. I think we should be grateful to, you know, okay, because we're lazy, we will easily not do the thing we thought we would do. But if you've agreed with somebody, it's like having a contract. If you've got a contract with somebody, I don't think you want to break a contract. You want to keep your part of the bargain, you know. So this is what happens with that. When you take refuge, you commit to various things. You commit to make offerings every day. You commit to at least be kind to sentient beings, at least not harm them. You commit to taking refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma Sangha 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night. You commit to study a bit of the Dharma. You commit to various things. And that's a serious thing. You're shaking hands with the person when you take refuge, like shaking hands with the Buddha and agreeing to your part of the deal. Well, I think it's powerful to have commitments because then you feel good about yourself if you keep your commitment. But that's the trouble too. People take refuge in their vows, but they never know what they committed to. They're completely confused. Then you get to the Bodhisattva path and you have even more commitments and more vows. And then by the time you take to an empowerment, you've got many commitments and vows and people haven't got a clue what they've done. We just end up just being confused because we haven't looked at what it is. We've got to treat it in a practical sense, in a more serious way for your own benefit. Because who's the beneficiary of all this? Not Buddha. He doesn't need it. This is us we're trying to produce, you know. So instead of the usual religious one of feeling pressured, feeling guilty, someone's going to punish me, which is very common in our culture, you become more accountable, you become more grown up, you know. I mean, instead of guilty, guilt is just no responsibility. Guilt is just self-blame. It's like blaming somebody else. It's copping out. Guilt is not helpful. So that's why the more we know our minds, the more we analyze these attitudes and then try to change them, you know. Because we've got these default modes we just run to. So something in the morning, Start small, start humble, understand the logic behind it. Even if you do a 5-minute practice, if you've taken refuge and then you've taken the lay vows, even 5 minutes is a great start to your day. You tick the boxes. Well, I took refuge, I did my water bowls. That's enough. There's no commitment to sit on your bottom. There's no commitment to do that. So you do exactly what you're committed to, no more. That's perfect. Be happy with that, Then at the end of the day, you can do the purification practice. But if you want to do more, you're very welcome. Gus is going to lay it all down for you, all the components of a daily practice, the classical Tibetan Buddhist practice from the Gelugpa point of view, from Lama Zopa's point of view. It's good to hear it. And then you can choose, but see the logic of them, see the reasoning behind them. Not just do it mindlessly, guiltily. Guilt just destroys everything, It's not helpful. It's not grown up. Guilt is like an infant, and we've all got it, so I'm not trying to be rude. It's anger, but you're the object. We run to it automatically. It's a natural consequence of ego grasping. It's a natural consequence of this root delusion called ignorance that has this dualistic view of moi, me. I said moi because I forgot I was talking to the French. I was talking to the French this weekend. So I'm saying many things here, just raving on, okay? But things that I'm sure we all hear and can recognize, So enthusiasm is the first one. Why am I doing this? And then that's why if you decide you're going to play tennis, if you never meet Federer again, you'll get very depressed because you forget what it's like to be a tennis player. But if you watch him every day, he inspires you. You go, wow, I want to be like that. That's why we've got to have good teachers and mentors and other people who are practicing, because they'll show us what it's like and we'll see the benefit and we'll get enthusiasm from that. If they can do it, I can do it too. That's the benefit of having a teacher, I promise. Otherwise, just you put your nose in books all day, you can't see any benefit. You've got to meet the cooks and the musicians. They'll give you inspiration by seeing them. And then you go, I can do it too. That's what enthusiasm is. I can do it too. And then the pleasure, you don't wait till you've ended up getting the goal for the pleasure. You get pleasure every day because you rejoice and you pat yourself on the back and you delight that you've made the effort and that you're sowing the seeds, and then the fruit will come one day. And you'll get little mini fruits every day anyway, So important. This fundamental attitude is so important. Then to understand the logic of what you're doing and why. And if you have got commitments, there's nothing more to do. You don't need to do more. No one says you have to do more. So do your commitments, bare bones, then add little pieces on top. They're like bonus, according to your capacity. And know the benefit of doing it. So the other thing is too this, because we're not going to be, most of us aren't going to be great yogis and yoginis who'll give up sex, drugs and rock and roll and go to the mountains, and even just to get single point of concentration, you need to do that. I remember I mentioned, I think, in the meditation class when I interviewed Venerable Rene, this amazing Swiss monk who's based in California. And he's a serious meditator the last 45 years or something, Remember we kind of met the Dharma at the same time. And he went straight off into retreats. And I interviewed him in 1995 in Mandalay about one of his 2.5-year retreats. He was doing single point of concentration. So he said there's no way he would have been prepared even just to get to the mountains. And it was, mountains, literally, the Sierra Nevada in Spain. We have a center there, a lovely center there called Ursulín, place of clear light. And he was there 2.5 years. His Holiness blessed it in 1982, and he said it reminded him of Tibet. It was so special. So he did 2.5 years retreat, intensive, 10, 12, 14 hours every day, every single day, 7 days a week for 2.5 years. But he said there's no way he would have been ready. And this is what preliminary practices means. Just, it's like going off and playing tennis immediately. You've got to get ready to play tennis. You've got to do all the preliminaries, push-ups and gym and diet. Well, to get to be able, if you're, for you to be capable to turn your back now, climb on a plane, go to Spain and go to this little mountain and get in a little kind of house, you get taken care of, they'll give you food, and you sit there for the next 2.5 years. Think how much effort you'd have to make to do that. And think how much you have to throw out of your life to be ready to do that, So he said there's no way in the world he could have gone off to do that retreat had he not been a monk for several years and lived in vows and done lots of purification practices and done lots of teachings and even given teachings. That was his preliminary practices to get him to be ready to make the supreme effort to get there into the mountains, So think if you, okay, we're not going to do that. Most of us won't do that. That's perfectly fine. So then how do we choose the practices to do? Because this is the big dilemma, because Tibetan Buddhism is such a vast system. There seem to be so many things to think about, so many things to study, so many things to practice. We get totally confused. Well, I'm not trying to sound crass about it, but please hear my point. It's obvious that we've only going to have a certain amount of time in our day for a formal practice. You obviously have to choose the practices that are most powerful for you, that are most meritorious, that are the most purification. And you have to learn that. You get advice from your teachers. So some people think, I've got to get single point of concentration. I'll sit there for 1 hour every morning doing single point of concentration, watching their breath and nothing else. Well, that's kind of 3 steps forward, 1 step forward and 4 steps back. That's not being insulting, because this is where you've got to be clear now about meditation. I'm not trying to be insulting. I always sound so blunt sometimes. We get very confused about how you define something as a spiritual activity or a Dharma activity. Well, the definition in Buddhist terms of what a Dharma activity is something that's motivated by the minimum one to wish to stop suffering and give up attachment to the nonsense, more than that to want to help others, and most of all, more than that, to want to realize reality. So the 3 principal aspects of the path. Any action you do that's motivated by one of these, that's a Dharma action by definition. You've got to be clear about that. So we think, meditation, that's spiritual. Mindfulness, that's spiritual. Well, I know one time at one course, I quoted Lama Zopa saying, well, thieves need mindfulness. And the fellow who was there, who got so insulted, and he left the course, and he wrote a very stern letter saying, I insulted Vipassana meditation people. Well, I didn't. I simply spoke the truth. That in the mind, one of the many mental factors is called mindfulness. And actually, it's referring to the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. But it's in the category of states of mind in Buddhist psychology that is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. It's like the mechanics of your mind. It's not virtue in its nature. Birds have concentration. A sniper has concentration, brilliant concentration. A sniper has brilliant mindfulness, has brilliant discrimination. These are not states of mind that are in their nature virtuous, but they're crucial ones. But so the thing that determines your mindfulness meditation being virtuous is your motivation for doing it. But if we don't know that, we'll think, I'm being so spiritual 1 hour every morning. Well, you'll go for 1,000 lifetimes. You won't get far. You've got to understand these things. Got to know what it is that defines an action as Dharma. And then 3 minutes of doing a small thing in the morning, as opposed to 1 hour of watching your breath, infinite more virtue, infinite more purification. So one has to know these things, and it takes time, of course. So you're then able to judge and decide which practices you do that suit your mind, that are most beneficial for you to get the most from it, the most purification and the most virtue. This is really important, I tell you. So various things I'm saying. Any more questions? More questions?
Hi, Venerable. I have a question.
Yes, sweetheart.
My question is the impact on health on daily practice. So I had a pretty good, solid daily practice for months. I got COVID back in Thanksgiving. Of course, ended up 3-4 weeks, just couldn't move at all, and still having issues with shortness of breath. So I can't actually say mantras anymore, but I say them in my mind. And then other things with
what happened to that? You can't. You mean, what do you mean?
I got COVID pneumonia. And so it's been nearly 2 months. It's still upper respiratory. Wow. So I get short of breath. Like now I get some laryngitis. So whereas, I would do the different prayers and
you say them silently. Just say them. But so then you have to adjust, don't you, Lisa? That's really sensible, isn't it?
So, but not only that, is also really, well, for me, I also get really bad brain fog. So of course, I'm sort of saying the words, whether it's a prayer and I'm trying to do it in English and I've sort of forgotten before I've said it. Same thing of just having this constant exhaustion. So of course, I found that my daily practice pretty much went out the window. So yes, so is it that,
how have you decided? What are the criteria that you have used to decide what you can and can't do? How have you decided? What is the basis for your decision?
Well, part of it is just the physical ability. So like I said, I still wouldn't
on what basis have you decided to do this and this and this, but not do this and this and this? How have you decided?
And sometimes it's just how I feel on that day. So I'm not sure whether, and of course, my practice isn't near where I want it to be. My question is, do I, even if I'm sort of trying to go through it, but I'm focusing because I've got this brain fog, am I getting any merit from it?
I understand that. That's that's the first question, Lisa. And that's where if we have even some semblance of understanding of this natural law of karma, okay, you must know about this, that every millisecond of what you think and do and say, that is what programs Lisa and turns Lisa into who she becomes. So based on that, if you know you got your practice, I don't know what level you're at and what you've committed to do, et cetera, but if there are certain things you like to do that you're capable of doing, even just with your mind, then sweetheart, you're sowing seeds. The fact that you don't remember that you put that seed in the ground doesn't mean you didn't put the seed in the ground, does it? It would help, wouldn't it? But if you know that just by saying that, even in your mind, or many people a few times thinking of compassion for sentient beings, that's the most profound practice for 1 minute. So you have to know that just the saying of it and the doing of it and your motivation, you're sowing seeds in your mind, Lisa. So be so happy. And this is my point, darling. It's a good question. This is what we often don't have confidence in, this idea, Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
And be happy with it. Be delighted with what you can do, And know that just the saying of it, because you see, Lisa, with karma, we're so used to in our culture thinking that the mind doesn't matter. We even say, oh, it's only in the mind, don't we? But there's the exact opposite for the Buddha, that every tiny thought sows a seed. So if you're saying some positive thoughts, honey, that's an amazing practice, just the thoughts. And I'm really being serious here. And if we understand this, we can get very content and be very content with what you're achieving. And also know that all your suffering, you're purifying you're putting atom bombs under all your delusions by having suffering. I mean, that's definitely the Mahayana view. So even though you're miserable, you should take care of yourself, but be delighted you're purifying all negative karma. Talk about preliminary practices. That's amazing. So special. So be happy about that. But are you getting better? Have you got good medicine, good doctors and things?
Fingers crossed, I'll be back at work in a few weeks, but yeah, I just keep going backwards. But that's okay. Hey, I'm not in hospital and I'm not dead, so.
But you take care of yourself. It's important. Good, darling. Thank you. Very helpful. Thank you, Lisa. Anybody else have something to ask?
There's a question in the chat, Venerable. It's how do I determine which practices would be best for me?
That's the point, isn't it? So that's the thing. Obviously, if you've been a musician for 5 years, you know what you need to do. But if we're fairly new, that's why we need to have a good teacher. We've got to have a person we can turn to who can ask us. Or even a person like, say, Gus teaching at the Shantideva Center, and if someone's doing that course, you'd ask Gus, what do you think? And he'd discuss with you. He'd work out what you think is this, and what about that, and what about this? And he'd know himself what's best for this. I mean, even your Dharma sister and brother could help you, But it's just really important to get good advice. If you don't know how to judge yourself, it's obvious. Like anything, when you start to play the piano, you've got to know what's the best kind of practice to do. We need to know that. So the bare minimum, I'd say, if you don't know anything, you're starting for the first time, would be to have something in the morning, even just to open a book by the Dalai Lama and read one paragraph and think about it. You cannot do better than that. I promise you, that is a perfect practice. And then at the end of the day, so let's talk about briefly this purification practice. Even if you don't even label it purification, not even a word you've even heard of, is this whole purification practice is just a method of like checking up on your day. You sit there and you check the things you did today that were dumb. You kicked the dog, your bad mouth, your boyfriend, whatever you did. You'd regret. You'd think, what a fool I was to do that. I don't want to hurt myself. It's like because you harm yourself. Then you regret. Then you think, well, what can I do? Then the next one is you have compassion. And then you can just do some little kind of meditation for a few minutes. Imagine you're purifying all your rubbish. And then you can make a decision. I'm going to change. Even 5 minutes of that, then you go to bed with a happy mind. You've got a good daily practice. It's taking the essence because you're putting imprints into your mind and you're beginning to come conscious. But of course, as you go to the centers and you get all these different things and you do Gus's course, you're going to get more details and then you can choose from those, So as you progress yourself, you'll get more and more ability to decide yourself what's best because you know what's involved, So it's one step at a time, darling. Who else? Something else? Okay, so then, So the points I'm making, I'll try and bullet point. One, know the meaning of the word practice. In Buddhism, this is to Lisa's point as well, the essence of the meaning of practice. What is it you're practicing? If it's tennis, we understand. If it's cooking, we understand. So practicing something, what you're doing as a Buddhist, what is the point, what a Buddhist is, essentially, is a person who begins to become conscious of their thoughts, is able to distinguish the negative, unhappy, fear-based, I-based, miserable thoughts and the valid, reasonable, appropriate, positive thoughts. That's the way in Buddhist psychology of distinguishing among the chaos inside us. This is not how we use in modern psychology. That is the actual job of being a Buddhist. So lessening the negative ones and growing the good ones. So every practice you do has to help you do that. So that's what, as I mentioned about the preliminary, the essence of tennis is to play tennis, hit the ball, forehand, backhand, but you've got all the preliminary practices first. That's why they're important. They prepare your mind to do the essential job. So that's why I said, even you start the day with, you've got no commitments to do anything, and you start the day and you open a book and you read a few words and think about them. That's practice. This is a crucial point, what practice means. Not sitting, watching my breath, oh, that's practice. Yeah, it's part of the practices. You're getting some concentration. You need concentration. You've got to understand the meaning. So then, and second, Lisa's point, remembering the view of karma, this is something we've got to get used to. This is a unique point of Buddha's, that every millisecond of what we even just think sows seeds in our mind, programs us with those very thoughts. That's a pretty powerful concept. That's the meaning of karma. So when we understand that, then we would want to be our own therapist. We would want to distinguish between anger and something else and begin to sort of, like I said, the process of living with them first, recognizing what it is, and then slowly arguing with it, slowly. So I didn't bullet point the points at all. I went off again. I don't know. What else? Ask me some questions, people.
Yes, Venerable, there's another question asking if you could please repeat the 3 things that make a Dharma practice.
Yeah, these are the whole path to enlightenment, that's Lam Rim, that the Tibetans refer to, this course basically that culminates in your Buddhahood. You graduate as a Buddha. And there's three ways of summarizing the different sections. So the very first one, the minimum determining factor for whether or not something is a valid practice, a spiritual practice, a Dharma practice, is it's called renunciation. So what it means is, given Buddha's view that we suffer because we have attachment and anger and all the nonsense in our mind, and then because we follow those, so then we program our mind with all this rubbish. They are the cause of our suffering. So any practice that's motivated, you sit down to read that book, you sit down to do your meditation, watch your breath for 5 minutes. Why am I doing this? So that I can become more conscious of my mind, so I can lessen my attachment and anger and grow my goodness and kindness. That's the very first one. At least the minimum wish to be able to become familiar with your mind and recognize what causes you misery and what causes you happiness. They call it renunciation of suffering and its causes. A simple way of putting it. The bare minimum is that. Then, in other words, you do a practice to feel better. That's not a Dharma practice. I'm not trying to be fundamentalist. There's nothing wrong. It's a really good analogy. Federer says, go do jogging. Jogging in its nature is not tennis, is it? Think about this. Jogging in its nature is not tennis. So I'm going to go jogging. Wow. Why are you going jogging? Oh, so I can get fit. Well, that's not going to get you ready for tennis. That's not the point. The reason is so you can prepare yourself for tennis. Then it becomes a tennis activity. So watching your breath isn't essentially being your own therapist, but it prepares your mind to do it. But if you do it just to feel better, then that's not the point. So the minimum motivation, they call it renunciation. But that means a recognition of what you think and do and say programs you, and the negative stuff causes you suffering and the positive stuff causes you happiness. That's the bare minimum to stop suffering, at least the grossest level. Then the next one is amazing, outrageous, unbelievable. for the benefit of others. May I do this meditation so I can develop qualities so I can be of more benefit to others. That's bodhicitta. That's incredible. Then you've got the third one. May I do this meditation so I can see the nature of reality, so I can realize emptiness, so I can get out of samsara. They're called the three principal aspects of the path: renunciation, compassion, wisdom. So motivation means, you see, when we understand karma, how we create karma, which is the law that Buddha says runs the universe, the law in which the universe runs, you know, it's a natural law. He didn't make it up. No one's running it. It's not punishment. It's not reward. There's no punisher. There's no rewarder. Not like that. It's a natural law. So the way it works is, as I said, every millisecond of we think and do and say literally programs us. Very simple way to put it, programs us. So given, I forgot the point I started with, I got lost. Why am I saying this? I can't remember what I said. I lost the plot. I lost concentration. What was I talking about before? Still,
Venerable, you explained the three principal aspects of the path.
Okay.
You were talking about compassion and wisdom.
That's right. And the basis for doing a practice, isn't it? That's right. The basis for doing the practice. I suppose that was the point. I still can't quite get the point. Maybe the point I'm getting at is that when we understand karma, then we'll understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the way karma works is this. Let's say a simple action of not killing, a complete action of not killing, which sounds a very passive thing, merely not killing, but it's very intentional. And this is the point I'm getting at too now. I'm getting the point now. So the first thing in place, in order for an action to be a complete action of killing, of not killing, there'd have to be a living being there. So like, let's say a little mouse in your kitchen. That's the first of the four components have to be in place. The second one is your mind involved. And this is the real point. For the Buddha, we create karma, quote unquote, when our mind does something. The main karma is called, the main action we do, action means karma, is mental action, mental action, mental action. And that's intention. I will not kill that mouse. But even more than that, underpinning that is your motivation. So intention and motivations, speaking in a simple way. Intention is, I will not kill the mouse. Why not? Compassion, poor mouse, oh my God. So compassion, the motivation for what you intend to do is what gives the flavor to the action. So sitting there, doing your meditation to feel better. And I'm not necessarily criticizing it. It's nice to feel better. Please excuse me. Don't feel I'm being a fundamentalist. But that's why we do everything. That's nothing special. You eat ice cream to feel better. You go to sleep to feel better. You get a boyfriend to feel better. Not bad, nothing wrong. Better than want to kill somebody. But it's not quite getting to the point of it's becoming a genuine practice that will transform you, which is what a Dharma practice is. So the motivation is the key. So you can sit and watch your breath, exactly the same job as the person next to you. You look identical, two people watching their breath, looking very good. One person has a motivation that they want to become a Buddha. They want compassion. They want wisdom and they want renunciation. Their mind is huge. The virtue they create, the karmic seeds they plant in their mind are like atomic bombs of virtue. The other person doesn't create much virtue at all because of the motivation. The action can look the same, but the motivation is different. So the motivation behind what we do and think and say, that's the key factor. So that what makes your practice virtuous and positive and useful and beneficial to you and others is the motivation. So that's easy to do, just to change your mind. Just change your mind. It's exactly the same as any action. You can see it. A person could have a knife. A knife is a knife. One person, what's in their mind? To kill somebody. The other person, what's in their mind? To cut out somebody's splinter. Looks like the same action. Knife, you're about to cut somebody. One reason is to save somebody. One person is to kill somebody. It's clearly the motivation is what counts. The motivation is everything. So we have to cultivate a positive motivation. And for Lisa's question, that makes your Dharma activity so powerful. Just to read that paragraph of Dalai Lama's book with a pure motivation to become like the Dalai Lama so I can benefit people, that is a stupendous practice in the morning. Another person watches their breath for 1 hour, almost no virtue in it because their motivation wasn't very powerful. You've got to understand, and this is logical, if you think about it. That's the factor that you've got to factor in. Doing the dishes can be a virtuous action. Your husband sitting in there looking all holy, doing his practice. Oh, stop making your noise. I'm trying to meditate, he will say, as if he's the holy one. And you're doing the dishes. Excuse me, your motivation can be much more pure than his. So it's the motivation that counts, you know. This is really a major point. And this is understanding karma, how we create karma. It's very logical because the mind is the main player. What else? Something else, sweetheart? Teresa? Yes, darling. What else? Who's got their hand up? Dawn, want to say something to me? No. Okay. No, it's okay. Who else? Nobody.
Nothing came through in the chat. I have a question. I guess it's in reference to what you're speaking of. So for instance, if I'm filling my water bowls in the morning and I don't really have much like mental clarity or joyful effort or like that positive motivation, is there still merit coming from that activity, even if my mind is kind of dull?
I understand, darling. Well, first of all, I think you're making it more difficult for yourself by calling the action filling my water bowls. Perhaps you can use a better term. What's a better term for that act, for that practice you're doing?
Offering.
Thank you, sweetheart. Already you're getting
I don't know why I said that.
It's very funny because we say that, emptying our water bowls and filling our water bowls. But it's very interesting. So already there you just answered the point by saying, I'm going to make my offerings to the Buddha. And if you're doing it mindlessly and you're saying the mantras, blah, 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 whatever you're doing, but still they do say, if you are intending to offer to the Buddha, just that alone is pretty potent because of the power of the object.
Got
but
it.
Obviously, anything we do with more intention, more motivation, more clarity, more concentration, the more powerful it is. So we do our best, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But at least get a happy mind doing it and be delighted to offer to the Buddha in the morning.
Yes.
And be happy about it. That's good for our mind.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thanks, Teresa. What else, darlings? It's 20 past.
Yeah, there's a question here.
Good.
Does motivation come automatically with taking vows, or do I need to set the motivation daily?
Every single day we have to remember. It's like programming our mind. We have to, and when you're a bodhisattva, then it will be automatic. If you've got renunciation, it'll be automatic. If you've realized emptiness, it'll be automatic. So until then, we have to program our mind with it, intending to do that. This is really powerful for us. But having vows, see, there's different point here now. Okay. In general, the actions we do, as I've just said, the main factor that determines the character of the action, that is to say, whether or not that action is called negative or positive, and there's only virtually those two choices, forget neutral. Again, the main factor that determines that whatever we do or say and think, whether it's negative or positive, isn't even the action, is the reason behind it, the reason that impels it, the motivation that is behind it, underneath it. So the motivation is the key thing. So right now, because we're in samsara, we're driven by attachment as our main motivation. So if you're feeling all good and lovely this morning, you'll do your practice because you're feeling not attached to it and you feel lovely. That's not a virtuous action. So in general, the motivation determines whether or not the action we do is negative or positive. This is an incredibly simple concept, and if we really got it, it would blow our minds. And we'll be able to judge every second whether the action we should do is beneficial or not. It's a very simple technical point to think about. So there are some actions, though, that are so powerful, so potent, that even without a motivation, in terms of saying, let's say a positive one, it will still be some virtuous karma. So even one about water bowls, offering to the Buddha. So this is where it can sound very superstitious and very religious to us, and we've got to think about the meaning. That any actions we do in relation to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the Guru, anybody representing the Dharma. In other words, they're said to be such a potent object of your action that even without a good motivation, there's still enormous amount of virtuous karma created and some purification. So another one is doing actions in the context of living in vows. And this is a technical point that's very practical. Before I get to that one, does the first point clear? Well, I hope so. And that we've got to think about because it sounds like superstitious, you know, it could be sounding like superstition. But the other one, actions done in the framework of keeping vows, because of the power of vows, they are so powerful. So Buddha loves his vows. And as even says in some of the teachings, that a vow is like a subtle physical form. It's visible to clairvoyance. There's something so powerful about vows. And I think psychologically it makes sense. So this is how Lama Zopa describes. So let's say right at this moment, we're not killing anything probably, are we? Unless we're sitting on a mouse and we don't know it. We're not killing. So that we think, aren't I a nice person? I'm not killing. But you're not creating any karma of not killing at all, because there's no intention to not kill. So intention means I will not kill. So it's only when you meet the mouse and you have the thought, the volition, I will not kill. You imprint that in your mind, then motivated by compassion. But the bare bones intention, until that's there, how can you leave a karmic imprint in your mind if your mind is not involved? So the point is, the only time you create the karma of not killing is when you consciously intend to not kill. And that maybe is quite a few times if you live with the cockroaches, and it's quite hard. But we just, even to get another human rebirth, even just to get another decent human rebirth after we die, we need in our little bank vault bucket loads of delicious, strong, intentional, non-killing karmic seeds. They're the main cause of getting a human body. So we don't create enough merit in the lifetime to get enough non-killing karma. But if you live in vows, the way Rinpoche says it, the way Buddha says it, every second you're keeping those vows 24 hours a day, because of the power of the imprint in your consciousness. When you kneeled in front of your guru and you said, from now until the day I die, I will never kill, I will never lie. And you reiterate that every day. You're digging this groove deep in your mind. And so even when you're asleep, you're ticking over virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing. In fact, Lama Zopa says, Rinpoche says, we can't get ahead of the game. We can't, it's my words. Being good is not enough. We need to create virtue in the framework of vows. This is crucial. This is a fundamental component of all Buddhist teachings, Okay, what else?
I believe, Alec, did you have your hand up?
Alec?
Yes, I did. Thank you so much.
Good, go.
So I love your metaphor of the weeds in the garden.
Yes.
And so within that metaphor, we can see a weed and we want to pull the weed, but sometimes we're just stuck when we see the weed, and then we don't know what to do with it. So what's the next step? Like, how do we actually?
Okay, good. Yeah, good point, Alex. So you're talking about seeing your mind, seeing the delusions. Exactly, that's right. And I think the point is, Alec, when we understand, if we take the Buddha's view seriously, that, we've got countless past lives and we come into this life so deeply programmed. I mean, what we mean by instinct in our culture and how we do so many things instinctively, all Buddha means is we've practiced those actions that often that it's completely second nature, to the point that we're not even conscious we're doing it. So when we can have that understanding of how primordially deep our tendencies are, we'll be a bit humble and kind with ourselves. And that's why we've got to dig deep and do the purification practice, disturb the peace underneath. And that's why this friend, I always quote, I mentioned it in the last teaching, this monk, I know, a friend of mine, Roger, for years and years and years doing retreats, 3-year retreats, 4-year retreats, intensive tantric retreats. And at one point he was out of his brain with extra levels of, talk about weeds, vomiting out of anger and rage. He was really distressed for his mental health. And he went to Lama Zopa, and Rinpoche laughed and laughed and laughed and said, fantastic, the dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. So when we really have the big view in Buddhism, the depth of these delusions, but also the depth of our virtues are there, then it's going to be an incremental, gradual. I mean, even to get to see a delusion is like a revelation. I mean, sometimes it takes us years to even notice we've got certain ones, the ones that are closest to us. So it's a really gradual process, Alec. And that's why we've got to do the practices in the morning, the purifications and other things, to loosen the dirt a little bit so we can begin to see them. And then, of course, if the habit is very strong, we'll even defend our right to have it. Of course, we will do anything to protect ourselves. This is this gradual process, gradual process. And to be able to get to the point where we can have the clarity to distinguish the rubbish from the virtues, that's pretty advanced, but that's where we're heading. So one step at a time, honey. But at least don't believe the story. That's the first major step. If you keep, you see, every time the anger comes and you believe it, whatever the story is, then you're just increasing it. But every time it comes up, because it's a habit, but you argue with it, you don't believe it, then that's like putting an atomic bomb under it. So that's why I have to learn to live with these crazy roommates, because they're not going to go overnight. But at least stop believing their story. Alec, this is a major step forward. We can really get some courage and we can start to do that. And that takes time. Do you understand, darling?
So then the practice is to don't believe the story and actually start to argue with it.
If you can do that, if it's so tormenting and so difficult, at least as part of your tiny bit of your wisdom, little tiny baby roommate comes peeping out and says, don't believe it, Alec, and you're still overwhelmed by it. At least as a tiny part of your mind, don't get completely immersed in it, you know. It's slowly. And even if you are immersed in it, just weep and cry and go and have a sleep, you know. Because this stuff's so deep, and when people start to do retreat, the vomit really does come out. It really is, and all the way to realizing emptiness, we're going to still see levels and levels and levels. I mean, Buddhist psychology, we know, goes to much more subtle levels of this stuff, you know, way more. The level, in our culture, we just call what we think is, we call it all normal. But the Buddha's calling it all, we're all mentally ill, you know. So his level of subtlety is way more profound. His level to which we can get rid of stuff, the degree to which we can grow our amazing minds is pretty stunning. So when we have the proper picture, we won't be so scared of the junk. But the key one is to hear it and not buy into it. That's the first step. Then slowly that'll weaken it just right there. But learn to be brave to listen to them and live with them and not wish they'd all go away. This is like a nightmare. Do you understand, Alec?
I do. I'm also thinking about some of the ones that are so prevalent for us in the West, of all of our self-judgments.
That's what I'm talking about. They're the ones I like, mainly those. And this is the irony of those. The key consequence of past attachment in past lives is we're born in this life with incredible dissatisfaction. And that's what we call self-hate and self-loathing and self-criticism. We're just deeply not satisfied. And the default assumption is I'm not good enough, I didn't do enough, it's not enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not beautiful, whatever it is. That's what we call self-hate. It's literally the consequence of attachment not getting what it wants. So that's one of the, and Lama Zopa says it's the worst suffering in our culture. We've got that in bucket loads. And this is the hardest one to not believe, because we just believe those stories.
I'm wondering if there's another way or some kind of practice that might help us change that belief.
That's what I'm talking about. Stop believing it. Stop believing it is changing the belief. As soon as if you hear someone say that Satan is running the world and Mr. Trump has been, sent by God to fix it, and you believe it immediately, you can see you're stupid. Well, we believe you're an idiot. Why do you believe you're an idiot? We should ask ourselves those questions. That's how you change it. We begin to develop some semblance of wisdom, and this takes so much time because this dissatisfaction is so primordially deep. Even though 1,000 times a day, even believing, so that's about yourself, but even the attachment to the cake, it's another lie. The cake isn't what you think it is, but attachment believes it'll bring you happiness. Just saying it won't is not enough, Alec. Just saying, no, Alec, I'm not really a creep. You won't believe the virtuous thought, but you've got to start somewhere, darling. As long as you just buy into that story, that's how you perpetuate samsara. The moment you get some semblance of wisdom, even a little tiny voice that says, well, Robina, that cake isn't what attachment thinks. No, Robina, you are okay as you are. We don't believe it, but what else can you do but start somewhere by arguing with it? That's how you change the belief. Slowly, darling. Do you see my point, Alec?
I do. I'm also thinking about how that idea of kind of like replacing the thought, kind of what you're talking about, of like, no, you're okay as you are.
That's right.
Are there any practices that are kind of more into that?
That is what the practice is.
Okay.
That is the practice, darling. I'm just putting it in ordinary, simple language. It's not formal. It's called a positive thought, Alec. We have positive and we have negative thoughts. A characteristic of negatives, they're liars and they're painful and we're addicted to them. That's why we suffer. So the characteristic of a positive thought is that it's relatively reasonable and valid. So just saying, you know, it's a bit like, I mean, this is something really logical. If you're really kind of full of attachment and neediness, which we all are, and you're practicing music and you get to grade 1, and then all you do is go, oh, I'm only in grade 1. Instead of, wow, I achieved grade 1, fantastic. Now I can get to grade 2. It's a simple example. A baby example. This is putting in ordinary Western words, down to earth psychology, what Buddha's telling us. But the first step is you have to hear the thoughts. And already this is part of the process. And that's why we do our practices. That's why you do your Bodhisattva in the evening. That's why you do your mantras. That's why you do your purification practices. They're the push-ups and the diet to help you get ready to play tennis. They make our mind more capable. But it takes years to do this unless we're highly realized, because attachment is very addicted to think not being satisfied. What do you think, Alec? Is it making sense what I'm saying?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. It's really such crucial points, Alec. I tell you, what you're saying is so fundamental, you know. But in the end, when we understand Buddhist psychology, if we study it, you learn that there are 3 categories, Alec, of all the thousands of thoughts in our mind. What some are called, they're all the neurotic, I-based, delusional, fear-based, negative, non-virtuous, disturbing, delusional. They're the characteristics of attachment, anger, self-loathing, anxiety, depression, jealousy, you name them. That's their character. The character of the virtues, love, kindness, self-respect, self-confidence, ordinary words, they are not delusional, they are not disturbing, and they are relatively in reality, in sync with reality. So then the more we can hear the rubbish ones, which just come from their own side, and cultivate the positive ones. Don't wait for the positive ones to come, Alec. We've got to be proactively stating them. It sounds so boring and so simplistic even, but this is what practice is, Alec, every second of the day. So but as we do more purification, more practices, more this and more the prostrations and this and the blah and the mantras and the blah, that works to kind of loosen the grip of the junk underneath, so the job becomes easier every day. And we gradually see the anger diminishes and the attachment diminishes and the jealousy diminishes. There's different methods to do it. I mean, this is a direct method of arguing every second. Another one is simply you hear the anger and you just say, oh, shut up, Alec, give it a break, and you just stop to be quiet. There's different approaches. You get my point? Or even by if you're angry with somebody, actively think positive things about the person. I mean, it sounds like Pollyanna to us, but that will put an atomic bomb under the angry picture. So there's different approaches from different corners, you know. By being kind to somebody else and giving them the cake they want will put an atomic bomb under your attachment to the cake. So there's directly against the attachment, and then there's a proactively doing the positive ones. There's different approaches. This is like little day-to-day things, you know. And all of this underpinned by a very good daily morning and evening practice. That's the components of what daily Buddhist practice. Do you understand, Alec? Good, thank you so much. It's time to go home, people. Yeah, it's late, finished. So I have to leave it to Gus to tell you all the details, okay? All right, Gus? What do you think?
Of course, Venerable, of course.
Good. Thank you, darlings, all of you. So we just delight, we do our little dedication, we don't want to know Tibetan. So just think, here we've been 90 minutes, gone like a dream, isn't it? And as many moments as there have been, this is the gardening one now, as many moments as there have been, as many seeds we've all planted. So just rejoice if for nothing else, even if you've forgotten everything I've said. Doesn't matter, you've sowed the seeds. So we think I'm going to nourish these seeds from this moment forward with my effort, a little bit every day, so they can grow in the future in the way we're motivated, no matter how long it takes, in our amazing potential, for our sake and the sake of others. Okay, everybody. Much love. See you all again soon. Thank you so much, Gus.
Thank you so much, Venerable.
Thank you, sweethearts. Thank you, all the people who asked questions.
Please come back soon. Please stay with us.
I will.
Thank you, Robina.
Much love.
Thank you, Venerable.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you so much, Venerable.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, so Yeah. So I
Are we staying
rejoice.
on for the rest
I
of the Discovering
rejoice.
Buddhism time?
So Gus, when
Yes.
I came in late and I
Yes.
would love, when will this be replayed?
That's a great question. I don't know. I couldn't say exactly when it will be up, but I would think that the recording would probably be up in the readings page. Does anybody who is here happen to know? I can't see everybody.
A readings page, what is that?
That's actually, you know what? That's a good question. I'm not sure where this recording will go. I'm not usually involved with that side of things. So this was actually part of our Discovering Buddhism module. Venerable Robina came to teach us tonight as part of the Discovering Buddhism
I
module.
understand.
And so usually the recordings from the teachings in the module, they go in the readings page for those who are registered in the module.
I won't be. And so would it be possible in 2 minutes to just say what she suggested we do each in the morning and in the evening, just like a skeleton of that?
Sure. I'll do my best. Let me see. And if anybody would like to jump in, by all means. In the beginning, Venerable Robina mentioned, she emphasized that the criterion for gauging our practice shouldn't be if it feels good, because just like going to the gym, some days might feel good, but most of the days it won't. It's about the goal and, the fact that we're taking a step towards the goal. She said, in terms of what to do in the morning, I took a lot of notes. She talked a lot about the idea of commitment, of doing something out of having made an agreement with the Buddha that you're going to do it. But it has to go according to your logic, according to your own pace, what makes sense. What I recall off the top of my head, and I'm still looking through my notes, is what Venerable emphasized the most was to make sure to at least do something. Oh, I remember. She said two things. She said, if you have commitments, to do your commitments, and she said there's nobody's saying that you need to do more than that. So anything beyond that, you can just add on a little bit at a time according to what makes sense to you. But to just do your commitments, don't expect that it will feel good. Try to do it with a joyful mind from the perspective of rejoicing that you're doing it, just rejoicing that you've done it. She used the metaphor of coming back from the gym, feeling all achy and with a headache and everything, but still feeling happy that you went and rejoicing. And she said it's very important to praise ourselves for that, for doing virtuous things. And she said at a bare minimum, do something positive every morning. She said, even if you just open a book by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and just read one paragraph and just think about that for a couple of minutes, she said, you can't do any better than that. That's the important thing, is that you're planting the seeds with a positive motivation, planting the seeds of virtue that way.
So if you don't do your commitments in the morning, but you do something like that, then you do them in the evening. Did she say that was okay, or are you?
Venerable didn't get into that level of detail, but I think I think the idea would be, it depends what your commitment is. If you made a commitment, if the commitment was to do something in the morning, then the commitment is to do something in the morning, I would think. But if the commitment is to do something every day, then I'm not. That's not what Venerable Robina said. She didn't answer. She didn't get into that.
Okay.
She basically said, in general, do your commitments. But she said, if you in the morning, if you do a little something and you rejoice in it, she said, if you take refuge and you do your water bowls, and then at night, if you review your day very informally, she said, just 5 minutes, review your day, think about the things you did that you regret, and use the 4 opponent powers and purify it, then you go to bed with a happy mind. She said, that's a beautiful daily practice. That's a perfect daily practice, she said.
That's wonderful.
Don't wait for happiness to come in the future. Praise yourself and rejoice, and the insights start to come. She quoted Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you're molding your mind into the shape that you like. Be very happy, she said, and pat yourself on the back. Rejoice in all the work that you do. She said, that's practice we never do, but we must. Would anybody like to add anything else that I'm leaving out?
Can I ask a question about commitments? What happens when you break your commitments? I mean, in terms of if you've missed your commitments, I know Vajrasattva would help, but did she talk about that at all? Missing commitments?
She didn't speak to that today. No.
It's okay.
No.
It's okay.
Venerable Robina's emphasis was on the idea that the important thing is that we're planting the seeds. It's just to plant the seeds and to be good to ourselves and kind to ourselves, and to replace the negative thoughts that come with well, not replace them, but notice the negative thoughts and then generate the positive thoughts. She said we can't wait for the positive thoughts to come on their own. We have very strong habits for negative thoughts and not as strong habits for positive thoughts. We can't wait around for the positive ones to come. We have to generate them on our own. We have to think them ourselves. The thoughts that say that I'm good, that I'm okay, that I'm doing a beautiful job, that I'm doing enough, because those are actually in line with reality, whereas the negative ones aren't. And yeah, and
it's in line with reality. Yeah.
And to recognize that again, that practice isn't going to feel good, that's not the point, because if we think it will, then we're going to stop after a week, because it doesn't. That the joy comes from rejoicing that we're doing it, rejoicing that we're planting the seeds, and that even if planting the seeds doesn't feel good, or even if we forget that we have planted the seeds or anything like that, once the seeds are planted, the seeds are planted. She said, it doesn't matter if you feel good. Like she said, if you feel good, how does that affect? What difference does it make to the seeds that you planted? You're going to get flowers. If you planted the seeds, you're going to get the flowers, whether you feel good or not. So basically not to worry about, I mean, that's maybe part of my interpretation, like not to worry about whether it feels good or not, but to rejoice in what we're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And again, it's please, if anybody else, if I'm leaving so much out, if anybody else, if there's anything, I see somebody wrote a comment. One point that Venerable Robina stressed over and over was the importance of setting a positive motivation in everything that we do, think, and say with joyful diligence. Thank you. Yes. Yes, she said, the motivation is what gives flavor to any action, and what determines whether an action is dharma or not is the motivation that gets us to do it. So she said that the minimum motivation for it to be dharma is renunciation, which is doing something with the intention of understanding our minds better, being able to distinguish the negativities from the positivities better, so that we can create our own experience as a happy experience rather than a suffering experience. That's the first level. The second level would be to do something. She gave the example, like to read a paragraph from a book by the Dalai Lama with the intention of becoming more like the Dalai Lama, so that you can be of help to others. So doing something for others. And then the third intention is to do something with the intention of understanding emptiness, of seeing reality, so you can get out of samsara. So to do things with those intentions, that's what makes them dharma practice. And this was towards the end, but it's really stuck out to me, not from personal experience or anything like that, just I thought it was such a colorful example of if you're doing the dishes with a positive intention and your husband is meditating in the next room and yelling at you because you're being noisy, then you're creating a lot more virtue than he is. And she said at the very beginning, she said, and I thought this was really, really helpful to me, at least. She said, laziness is I can't be bothered. And the reason for that is that whatever it is that we can't be bothered to do, it takes effort. And effort is doing something other than what attachment wants. And the most primordial attachment is the yearning to be comfortable. We don't like stress, we don't like pushing, but that's what effort means. But when you understand the benefits of something, then you'll have the enthusiasm to do it and you'll push through it. You don't benefit from anything until you go beyond the point in which it becomes difficult, and then you keep expanding that point. So if you don't have confidence in the benefit of practice, you won't do it. But she said the worst kind of laziness is the laziness of, oh, I can't do it. It's not possible. That's the worst one. And that's the one that holds us back. She said, even after all these years, I do my commitments. It's difficult. I'm thinking about my delicious breakfast waiting for me. And these are paraphrases because I was writing it fast. Who forgets breakfast because they're meditating? The bodhisattvas, yes. None of us, though. So I just do it and get through it, though. Meditating to feel good is beyond ridiculous. Eat an ice cream, you'll feel a lot better. But she said, okay, here she said something. I miss my commitments. You know, if I miss my commitments, we have all this guilt about it. And because it's spiritual, there's all this guilt, we'll be punished and go to hell.
Right. Yeah.
Which I didn't write down what she said after that, but basically she was saying that makes no sense. I mean, you might have heard what she said about guilt at the end. She said guilt is something that it makes sense for infants. I mean, it's
no, I didn't hear that.
Oh, she said, let me see what
I came in very late.
Oh, sure, that's okay. She said, let me see what she said about guilt.
That would be wonderful. That's what I'm talking about with commitments.
Got it. Yep. I gotcha.
I find if I miss one and then I feel guilty, I miss more than one.
Yes. Oh,
because
definitely.
The guilt does it. I don't want to go near it.
Definitely. Let me see if I can just do a quick search to find it.
What was that, Andy?
She said, guilt is taking no responsibility. She said, guilt just destroys everything. It's not grown up. It's like an infant, but we all have it, so don't beat ourselves up. That's what she said. I know that in Buddhism, guilt is considered a very, very destructive emotion. It's not helpful. Wait, and here's something she said. Even a 5-minute practice, refuge and water bowls, you've done your commitment. Be happy with that. There's no commitment to sit your bottom down, she said.
There's no commitment to what?
To sit your bottom down. Like meditation, there's no, generally speaking, there's a commitment to. And in terms of Venerable Robina didn't touch on this, but if it's helpful, I read something a Lama said one time where he said that it's like breakfast. We might have the intention to have breakfast every day, right? And that's the plan. And so we do that. And then one day something comes up and we miss breakfast, so what do? We just have breakfast the next day. There's nothing more to do. It's just a matter of, you don't give up the intention. You said, oh, I missed breakfast once, so I guess that's it then. Or, oh, I missed breakfast, I'm so bad. You don't have to do anything like that.
That's our Western mind, yes.
Very strongly so. Very strongly so. Dawn reminds me that she said guilt is anger and the self is the object. Yes. Alec says that
wonderful.
She has questions. Alec, would you like to?
Well, actually, I wanted to first defer to Andy because he's been raising his hand a couple of times.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So,
I missed
Andy,
it.
you want to go first?
I go.
It's so wonderful to see you, Andy.
It's great to see you. You're the one that started me on this path. I think the essence of Robina is to be clear, to not make our practice this holy thing and forget that it is always comes back to reality and looking at how we are dealing with situations and the people in our lives. And I think the act of offering is so powerful in the morning, where we set the intention. There is gratitude in making an offering, and I think that's very powerful. Just that alone is huge. And then we can start the process of looking at our mind from the minute we put our feet on the floor. And that's very powerful.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Did she say something about purification in the morning?
She didn't mention that. She didn't mention that. She mentioned purification at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, but not like 35 Buddhas in the or whatever.
No, Lama Zopa Rinpoche recommends that, but Venerable Robina didn't mention that tonight. Alec?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm really kind of processing this idea of it's not going to feel good, but I'm also trying to take it into kind of the needs of the Western mind and where we are as our own mindset. So I'm also thinking about this idea of cultivating positive thoughts. And one of the practices that I'm becoming much more familiar with right now is the practice of self-compassion, right? That's really exploding right now. And in the practice of self-compassion can bring relief from the pain and the suffering that we feel from our own negative thoughts. And that feeling of relief is a type of feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels to me like that is something we do need at certain points, right? And in certain ways. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to kind of maybe bring that up for discussion, especially because of your professional background. If you wanted to weigh in on that kind of thinking.
Sure. I mean, I think self-compassion is crucial, and I think Venerable Robina would agree based on everything she said tonight. It's absolutely crucial. I guess maybe the way that I would integrate that with what Venerable Robina was explaining is that also is about planting the seeds. You know, sometimes when we try that, we'll get the result right away and we'll feel the self-compassion and we'll feel amazing, and that's wonderful. She was very clear, you know, there's nothing bad about feeling good. It's not like it's not like it needs to feel bad. It's just that it's almost like it's irrelevant to the point of what we're doing, right? So in the same way, cultivating self-compassion, even if it doesn't feel good, you still rejoice that you did it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure. I think to your point, perhaps, I think we need it so much. We need it so much that at least a lot of the time it's probably going to feel good.
Yeah, exactly. That's been my experience as well. And it almost feels like to me that there's a certain need needs to be filled to a certain level. And then we can, from that place, we can have the self-confidence to move into this wonderful logic that Robina brought up about how it's not going to feel good. We're doing hard work. You know, we're going to the gym of our minds. Mm-hmm. But at some place, for some of us in some parts of our lives or just whatever it is, sometimes we need to get up to that point.
Sure. Well, I wonder if perhaps the practice for you right now, let's say based on what you're saying, might be to cultivate self-compassion in a disciplined way, even if it doesn't feel good. You see what I mean? Like, I wonder if maybe that's what you're saying perhaps might not be different from what Venerable Robina was saying. Maybe what you're doing is you're identifying the key practice, the heart of the practice for you right now, and probably for most of us right now.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Of course. Thank you. Elizabeth reminds me, Robina also said that guilt is copping out and of no help whatsoever to anyone. Yeah, there's nothing, the only positive thing that we could say about guilt is that we can get over it. We can destroy it. You know, there's no, and in Western psychology too, we find, just as Amy was saying before, that guilt actually slows us down. Like if we do something bad and then we feel guilty about it, we're more likely to keep doing it. Especially if we didn't do something good and then we feel guilty about not having done it, we're going to keep not doing it. It's like the Little Prince, right? Like, why do you drink? To forget what? That I'm ashamed of what? That I drink, right? It's that's how it goes with guilt, surely, certainly.
Thank you so much. Huh?
Is there anything else that anybody would like to? Oh, Lisa, yes.
Thank you very much for this evening. And she's so delightful and so
Isn't
wonderful.
she?
Yeah, she's just amazing. I live sort of in the hinterlands, and I'm not sure how it is that somebody goes about finding a teacher. I feel like I'm winging it, and just from having gone on a purification retreat at the start of the new year, and so I'm just taking those things, but I eat my breakfast before before I do, like,
oh, shame.
I know, like, well, nobody's told me, and I'm Jewish from culturally, and there are lots of rules when you do what, when, how you, everything,
Yes.
not that I was ever Orthodox, and so I don't even know how to start, because I don't know how. The first thing about finding a teacher.
Yes. Well, yes, I'm just laughing because I'm empathizing with what you were saying about
I
the,
mean,
the
you're in Park
rules.
Slope. I lived in New York, if I were still there, I know exactly what to do, but
Yeah. Well, one benefit that we got from this whole tragedy of the pandemic is that the world really woke up to the fact that we can do these things like we're doing now,
not
like
in
that
person.
yeah, and so I would be very surprised if this didn't outlive the pandemic, like at least the ability to join in these other ways, so I think you used to live in the hinterlands, maybe now we all live in the same village together to some extent, so you're certainly welcome, and like everything we're doing now, we're doing virtually, so you're certainly welcome here, and I'm sure you're certainly welcome at any Dharma center that's doing things virtually. So that's one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, in terms of how to find a teacher, specifically that question, there's maybe you can say there's three parts, and this isn't some official Buddhist thing, I'm just kind of putting it this way. The first part is to keep making the aspiration, keep like verbalizing the aspiration in your heart, that's very important.
Right.
The second part is keep coming to teachings, go to as many teachings as you can with as many teachers as you can. It's you'll never make friends if you never leave your house, right? Like, and you'll never find a teacher if you never go to teachings.
Right.
And then the third part is, when you find a teacher that really inspires you and really moves you, then check them out, really check them out and build a relationship slowly. It means so, okay. So there have to be two parts, kind of, a teacher has to meet two criteria. And again, I'm putting things in a very simple way. The first and most important is that they really have to move your heart. That's it. For everything else, you have books, but for this, there's MasterCard, there's some commercials coming to mind, whatever. Like for everything else, like you have books, you have articles, you have videos, you have this and that. The one thing that those things can't do for you, as Venerable Robina was explaining, is they can't truly inspire you, not really, not deeply, not continually, so you really, the teacher needs to be somebody who, when you hear them, you feel motivated, you feel, you know, something clicks for you, something shifts for you, not just like, oh, okay, good, that's a good explanation, right? Now, because human hearts are fickle, you also want to make sure, this is the second criterion, that you want to make sure that it's not going to be somebody who's going to disappoint you, you know? You don't want to go just, you know, like, oh, this moved my heart, okay, that's it, this is my teacher now, you know, because then a few weeks later, a few months later, a few years, you know, years later, you learn something about them. It's like, what? They said what? They taught what? They did what? And suddenly it's like everything comes crashing down. And that's a crash we don't want.
Right.
You know, so the recommendation is they say to investigate the teacher, they literally say to spy on the teacher, you know, to try to find out like, who are they? What's their deal? Like, what do they say? You know, like but most importantly, what are their students like?
So how, like, what if their dance card is all full up? You know, like, I've been spending quite a bit of time on the internet and going to various teachings and everything, but it would seem that some of the best teachers, like, they couldn't possibly have any room for another student. Like I would feel very shy about asking.
Well, you know, these things happen gradually, you know, just like any relationship. You come to teachings, you listen to them, like, you know, that you might consider them your teacher on one level. You know, the Dalai Lama says, you know, at first think of it as just like a teacher at school or something like that, just like a, you know, like somebody who's a source of good information and who inspires you and so on, and let the relationship develop gradually, you know. But from a very practical perspective, I think the most helpful thing to do would be to join, you know, I mean, I teach Discovering Buddhism, so that's kind of like what comes to mind, like something like that, like a program, you know, where you have contact, like in a small group, you know, with people from week to week to week, and with a teacher of some kind, like from week to week to week, where you can ask like the practical questions, where you can get the information itself, and that, you know. So, for example, like I teach Discovering Buddhism, so I'm the teacher at Discovering Buddhism, but in that level, you don't need to be super inspired, you know, like you get just to get the information as a starting point, you know. So you can be inspired by one person over here, even as you're getting like the details of the information from somebody else over there, at least as long as there's both of those things are getting fulfilled somehow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you
glad.
all for, I asked a whole series of questions. Thank you very much.
Very important ones. Thank you. We should probably stop in a moment, but does anybody else, was there anything else that anybody else would like to share or ask? Or all right. Sheila? Wait, Sheila, we can't hear you yet.
I just had a quick question. Robina mentioned something. She talked about it being eye-based and fear-based, and there was a third based.
Oh yeah,
I did. Tell what that reference.
I didn't catch all of the based that she said, but what she was saying, what she was referring to, were the negative mental factors, the delusions, the afflictions. Like there's lots of names for them.
Right, that's what I figured, but
that's
you
it.
didn't get all of them, huh?
Oh gosh, no, they were so good. But hold on, I'll tell you the few ones I got. Here, let me do a search in my notes for based. Right. She said, all thoughts fit into one of three kinds.
Right.
Neurotic, eye-based, fear-based, disturbing, delusional. And she said so many more things and I didn't catch them. Okay. And then the second kind she started to talk about was the words I happened to catch were love, kindness, self-respect, self-confidence, not delusional, not disturbing, more in sync with reality. And I'm not sure if she mentioned the third type, but the third type would be basically neutral, not based on delusion, not based on virtue, just kind of functions of the mind in themselves. There are some that, some are variable, like they could be accompanied by delusion, or they could be accompanied by wisdom and compassion. And and some in theory are neutral, but those are rare.
Thank you.
Okay, of course.
And you are inspiring, yes, very inspiring teacher.
Very kind, thank you. You're very sweet and kind, and it's your eyes. And thank you very much. Thank you all so much. I'm so glad we got to do this all together. And it's so good to see you, Andy. It's good to see everybody else too, but I haven't seen Andy in a very long time. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Right? Be well. Take care.
Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, guys.